the incumbent BJP government of Narendra Modi is set to win a third term. Elections have not even started. I don't know why there's already such a mood of resignation from the opposition when they should be actively believing that they can put up a fight.
One girl went on a Tinder date with someone, came back and she said, it was cool, but he speaks too much Hindi.
Oh, look at him, he does not know how to use the utensils the right way. How could we have a leader like that? If that is your perception of what a good leader is for this country, is he can speak good English and he knows how to do a proper toast with a wine glass with his pinky out, and he can use cutlery the right way and leave it in the right position.
There's a level of pride that was instilled in him to say that I work in an establishment that doesn't serve Indian liquor.
This quote is almost exact. In the 21st century, I don't think someone like Narendra Modi can ever be Prime Minister of a country like India. But if he wishes to come and serve chai at the Congress headquarters, he'll be welcome.
And so I was at a very nice restaurant in Mumbai, and someone at the table ordered the classic, an Old Monk and Coke.
Okay.
And the waiter says very nicely and a little smugly, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't serve Indian liquor."
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's stupid because Old Monk tastes great.
That's a great thing.
And what annoyed me was not so much that they didn't have Old Monk. What annoyed me is that he could have just said, "Sorry, sir, we don't have Old Monk."
Right.
But there was a level of pride that was instilled in him to say that I work in an establishment that doesn't serve Indian liquor.
Yeah.
Now, he is a wage worker. Probably was drinking desi daru at a theka,
Right.
And still, his idea of where you reach when you've made it in life is to be at a restaurant in India where they don't serve Indian liquor.
Yeah.
Not only do they say they don't serve Indian liquor, but the irony is they do serve Indian liquor. They serve Stranger and Sons.
Correct.
What is it about Old Monk
that's somehow considered
too desi, not becoming of an establishment like ours?
It's bizarre. I don't know why certain kind of brands get this connotation of somehow being too desi or too rural or too... It's not for sophisticated people.
Not for sophisticated
right?
people.
And I think that's something that we'll always grapple with, because see, the fact that he said they don't serve Indian liquor is hilarious when I think, was it maybe 2 months ago, an Indian company won one of the most highest, most prestigious awards in single malt categories. Indri is the brand.
Oh yeah.
Like won I think best I forgot gold award or something like that. So clearly the Indian liquor industry is stepping it up big time, right? So if it's a point of that we're not able to do it as well as other countries, I think even that's starting to change.
It is, and like I said, they had Indian liquor there. It was the vibe of Old Monk that they didn't like.
Maybe
it's drunk by too many Indian uncles eating chakna.
Yeah.
And that's not us. Of course, this place had a white receptionist, right? Probably earning stupid amounts just to stand there and be white.
See, I think that's the problem, right? We ourselves, and I think in our lives, you and I have probably been subject to this, or we've been a part of this as well, but we
100%.
somehow, because we viewed them as somehow being better, we associated that with a high quality establishment, which is very sad. It's so sad, right? So you would say that, okay, it has all these kind of things. It keeps, only prim and proper Indian people there. That's the kind of place I want to go to, right? I don't want to engage with these other people, and that's really sad. And I think that we have to really look, introspect.
It's us. It's not anyone doing it to us.
No,
it's a level of self-hate.
Because think about it. Even the fact that the venue, see, in the end, businesses are profit-driven entities.
Correct.
They won't do this if there's not a demand from the people to not have Old Monk. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they're not saying, oh, we're making a status symbol and not having this liquor. It's the equivalent of customers would come there and say, oh God, this place serves Old Monk. Like, That's not really upscale by my standard.
I don't want to see it on the menu next to my drinks.
Correct, right? So I think until we introspect and understand why we feel like that when we see something that is maybe associated with too much Indianness, whatever that means, I think we're always going to be stuck in this cycle of, at some level, self-hate, of putting our own people down. And I think we all have a lot to learn.
Maybe it would be even too absurd for them, the markup they would have to put on Old Monk to sell it there. Like one shot costs worth 2 liters of
that
whatever.
would be illegal.
Illegal, like a level of... but to your point, we do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And I caught myself doing it quite recently. A friend of ours actually, who is a yoga practitioner, has been practicing yoga for many years at Kerjiwal and traveled all over this country. And he recently got accepted into the Harvard School of Divinity.
Right.
And I was like, wow, congrats. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
Now you've made it.
Right.
And he looked at me and he was like, when I applied, I was pretty pumped. And then I spent about 3 months in the mountains with actual rishis and actual yogis.
Yeah.
And it occurred to him that perhaps even the loosest approximation of divinity is not to be found with a Harvard degree paying $70,000 for it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So we do it to ourselves. It's ingrained. And if something like yoga can be appropriated so strongly by them and we are allowing and encouraging it, I think it is quite sad.
And on the yoga point, when you just said it, this friend who we both know very well, I caught myself doing the same thing. When I asked him last time when we met, I think we were just talking about getting a license to be a licensed practitioner or licensed teacher of yoga. And I said, oh, have you done your International Yoga Alliance training? And he said, no. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I'm not interested in getting International Yoga Alliance certified because that's an organization based in the US. Why should I get certified there when the land of yoga has enough certification institutes that are perhaps even truer to the source of what yoga in the classical sense is supposed to be? So why should I not be getting certified here? And even I had to catch myself saying, oh man, why did I think that International Yoga Alliance certification is somehow the peak when your domestic ones can be as good or if not better?
I mean, do the domestic ones have a hot white chick in Lululemon?
Probably not. Yeah, I think it's become so. I think we could do a whole conversation on yoga itself, but I think having lived abroad, some of the places I've gone to for yoga classes and the things I've seen that have been passed off as yoga, it's disappointing. And I don't think I'm someone that's ever been I think people also take the whole oh, this is culturally appropriate, like that too far. I think our entire civilization has always been at some level a mix of cultures, trade, spices, culture, conversation, language. Intermix is okay, and adoption of a practice can be a beautiful thing.
In fact, yoga, there's absolutely nothing fundamentally Indian about it to the extent of its application. It's a human experience.
It's a human experience that everyone can do and should do. But for me, it comes to stripping it off its spirituality and religiosity, by the way, as well.
100%.
Stripping it off all of that to just kind of make it a buffet where you can pick and choose what yoga should be for you. Even if you want to do that, that's okay. But then, it's going so far away from the source of what that should be, I think, in many cases, where for the first time, I never thought I'd care until I went for a yoga class, or went for a class that was pitched as a yoga class. And, it was like playing hip hop music and you're doing physical toning exercises, listening to upbeat music and dancing. I'm like, what is going on? Even I'm offended, and I don't get offended easily at all. So it was embarrassing. But, call it a fitness class. Call it great. I have no opposition to it whatsoever.
And in yoga, asana is just one small part of yoga. What everyone is pretty much doing is asanas, which is fine. That is actually true in India. It's true abroad. Yeah. But certainly the true essence of yoga is being missed out if the focus is, say, on toning your glutes.
Correct. And in fact, it's sad because you're missing out on a very beautiful part of yoga, and I've been trying to explore that more. And I think I was on the same page, right? Like, even when we have these conversations, I never wanted to come across as like you and I weren't in the same position. Like, we are very much, not part of the problem, but we have been there, and like, this is a process of learning, unlearning, relearning. But I think that just go even to language, Rohan. How many times as kids, hand on our hearts, have we seen people make fun of other Indians for how they speak English? Right? I mean,
about 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th standard.
Yeah, right. Through school, you're making fun of kids for not just the youth, right? You're making fun of anyone for how they speak.
Disrespectful.
You'll
make fun of a Hindi teacher for how she speaks English.
Yeah, and like, this is an adopted language for us, right? I mean, it is the language with which I communicate now, and I'm very happy to have learnt it. But to think that we were judging a person's intellect or a person's value or ability to contribute based on their English is very sad.
So this reminds me, one time this came up when we were in a group of friends, and one girl went on a Tinder date with someone. She came back and she said, he was cool, but he speaks too much Hindi. Like, his mode of communication is Hindi.
Right.
And before judging too hard, I asked, I was like, okay, so what is the issue? She said, no, it's just like a language barrier thing. It's a communication issue.
Right.
It is not, it's not that I look down on Hindi or English or anything like that. It's a communication issue. How will I speak to them?
Yeah.
The same person has then started dating a French guy.
Yeah.
White. Can't make it through a McDonald's here in English or Hindi. No issues. It's cool. He doesn't speak English. He speaks French.
Yeah. See, one is, it just became like French is considered a sexier language. So that's okay. No communication barrier.
What communicate? I'll just look at him and be happy to be dating this white French guy.
Yeah. Isn't that insane? I mean, I'm sure there's so many stories of this, and the language thing is particularly, I don't know, that one really irks me a lot. I think even in like modern political conversation with when in 2014, I remember the run up to the 2014 election with Prime Minister Modi himself. That was what people in certain circles were pitching as a demerit to, as something like a shortcoming of his politically, was that he doesn't speak English well. They're like, what will he do in a foreign policy setting? People even as recently as Prime Minister Modi's trip to the US for the state dinner, oh, look at him, he does not know how to use the utensils the right way. How could we have a leader like that? I'm like, is that seriously what your barometer is for good leadership for a country like India? Because that's sad. You're living in another planet, right? If that is your perception of what a good leader is for this country, is he can speak good English and he knows how to do a proper toast with a wine glass with his pinky out, and he can use cutlery the right way and leave it in the right position. That's I think you need to have a long hard look at why you believe that.
And I think right now, in the years after that, based on his appointments, India's foreign policy representation is at an all-time high.
Fantastic. You've gone from strength to strength, managed to balance a very tricky foreign policy position in the last 5 years specifically, right? COVID through multiple 2 wars. Been straddling that line of being a mediator, of being a friend in strategic partnerships, in special relationships with countries, but being as well interlocutor between the EU bloc, the US bloc, to Australia, to Southeast Asia. It's not been an easy foreign policy job at all. And he did it not knowing much English. So I guess, what does that say about us?
I think this segues perfectly into this article, which doesn't go on to foreign policy as much as domestic policy.
Yeah, this is more domestic, but
want to give some background to the article from The Economist, written by Yamini Iyer, and it has caught in storm, I'd say, more after her resignation 3 days following its publication. Obviously, claims of censorship are at an all-time high following this.
Right.
The resignation does not seem to disrupt those claims at all.
Correct.
Ironically, a big chunk of this is about political censorship. I personally think that if they wanted to censor her, this article wouldn't be out.
Correct.
You don't, it's not like they don't know that people publish stuff in The Economist.
Exactly.
So let's get into the article. Why don't you give some background and tell us how you want to go through it?
Yeah. And for one very interesting scene setter tidbit, the author, Yamini Iyer, her father is the one, Mr. Manishankar Iyer, who is a long-time Congress party stalwart. And speaking of how we look down upon people that don't speak English well and are not fully culturally attuned to the West. In the lead up to the 2014 election, Manishankar Iyer has said, and I believe this quote is almost exact, in the 21st century, I don't think someone like Narendra Modi can ever be Prime Minister of a country like India. But if he wishes to come and serve chai at the Congress headquarters, he'll be welcome. So that is to just give you a perspective of how they viewed this, our current Prime Minister. That should tell you a lot.
And how they viewed pretty much people who have chai.
Yeah, he's a chai wala,
He's
right?
representing a huge mass of the country.
Our current Chief Minister, who was a rickshaw driver before this. So in some senses, still what has started to change electorally in India is that it is truly anyone's game. Once we break past the dynastic politics that we've had for so long, where it's only family, it was a family and friends business. As you see that moving, it's becoming a playing field that we've never kind of seen before, right? If you can speak and represent your people and really represent their professional, personal, emotional, aspirational desires, you actually have a shot and you can get a ticket and run an election. So I think that's an amazing thing.
Let's not punish the daughter for the sins of the father, though.
Let's not punish the daughter for the sins of the father. Agree.
Let's look at it.
So, I think this article came out. So another piece of context is that her think tank, right, Center for Policy Research in India, they had their FCRA license cancelled. So your Foreign Contribution Regulation Act dictates that foreign money received by entities in the country, there's a lot of rules, but essentially you have to use that money for the purposes that you've stated, upon receiving those funds. So I believe for CPR it was educational purposes. I need to read that in detail, but that's what they claimed was
certainly wasn't BJP bashing purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And CPR has a long history of very top-notch scholarship in the country, right?
Okay.
Almost, I think, 50 odd years they've been here.
And The Economist has a even longer standing history of superb research, articles.
And interestingly enough, pre-2014, they were the ones that were actively supporting Narendra Modi as a candidate, if I remember correctly. And they've actually had a 180 since then. Since 2019, then they were kind of against him becoming a leader again. So a lot of context in play. So already for me, an article like this, when we were in college, there was this idea, okay, who's your author? What is the author's intent? What are the pieces of evidence used by the author in their argument? And what are the potential conflicts of interest because of who the author might be? These are all the things that you can look at when analyzing a paper, right? So say this one, already some minor kind of conflicts of interest, right? So you form a think tank that is currently being challenged by the center for being in violation of FCRA norms. That will be fought in court. So see, essentially the question is this being done just to target certain entities? When also since the start of the BJP in 2014, I think more than 20,000 FCRA licenses have been, or 20,000 NGOs have lost their license to the FCRA across all opinions, across all religious groups are not just Christian, not just Hindu, not just Muslim, not just left, not just
it
right.
is not
across
heavily.
the board for those that have violated FCRA norms.
Okay.
You've lost your license if you've not, complied on certain tax regulations that you have to meet. Right.
Okay.
So this is the context. Now, in this article, why I find it very interesting is because a lot of those keywords that we spoke about in episode 1 appear here. Right. So things like, extremely right-wing, authoritarian, government on the verge of collapse. You hear a lot of this, and why, and that's why I kind of want to dig into it, right? First off, she already opens with a line that I find very interesting from a pre-election standpoint, right? You're just saying that the incumbent BJP government of Narendra Modi is set to win a third term. Elections have not even started, right? So, and you're seeing this across the board. I don't know why there's already such a mood of resignation from the opposition when they should be actively believing that they can put up a fight, right? How can I as a voter, let's say I'm a voter on the fence, which I might well be. If I'm seeing an article, right, technically from the opposition, let's say, that's already resigned to loss, why would I vote for you, right? Where's the confidence that you can win this election?
Where's the Vishwas?
Where's the Vishwas? Where is the Vishwas? So the article has a lot of the keywords that you'd expect, cult of personality, aggressive centralization, which is something I'll come to, and the exclusionary Hindu nationalist ideology. So she opens with that scene setting. And then her pieces of evidence, let's say, is that she believes that the space for political opposition, media, academia, civil society to express their views is shrinking.
Okay. Is this related to the FC?
So her last line is related to the FCRA
Yeah,
violation, where she's saying that foreign funding of NGOs to disproportionately target opposition politicians and criminalize dissent.
That's related to the FCRA violations which they are being investigated for currently.
Currently, exactly. I mean, you can draw that string. I don't know if she's hinting to that specifically, but maybe you can draw that logical string back. But for me, they believe that that space is shrinking. And to be honest, Rohan, I don't know how much that claim can withstand a very rigorous evidence check, right? Because for that to be true, articles like this should not be coming out logically. Or the dime a dozen articles and videos and news channels through the day that are like lambasting the central government for everything from being, a Nazi Germany type regime
to thumbnail of Modi with devil eyes.
To comedians that have, say some horrible things about, India, Indian culture, which, I believe they're fully entitled to do. I support that. And the fact that I've gone for comedy shows that have that should tell you that this shrinking space idea, I'm not sure I see it as much. I think it seems like a very, very alarmist statement to me when daily what I'm reading is things that are extremely, extremely critical of the center. And they're allowed to do that. And then, there's no threat to their life per se, if that's a claim that's being made.
Just to read the first line, it reads like Edgar Allan Poe wrote it. A dark shadow of creeping authoritarianism looms over India as it prepares for its 18th general election.
So I had read this great post again where if you truly believe that they are this authoritarian dictatorship, then they're clearly a very bad one, right? They're clearly really bad if they're not able to even get certain laws passed, which will come to, or articles like this.
The Economist, everyone's waiting on this to drop. You think they've not read this article before it came out?
So the shrinking space point, I don't know. I hear it a lot. There have been instances, say on the FCRA violation front, certain think tanks have been caught out, whether that's normal due process or whether there's again a more nefarious agenda or insidious agenda. That is probably worthy of an independent investigation. But I think to use that for me as a crux or one of the cornerstones of your argument is already shaky to start, right? Then the other pieces of evidence that she dives into is tax laws. Here, I know almost exclusively she's referring to the Goods and Services Tax in India, the GST, which is a landmark law that explicit purpose was to unify a set of very disparate tax laws and bring them into a unified system in the country. Right? Again, I'm not a GST lawyer, but at least as much as I've followed it since this landmark ruling. It's had its growing pains, but it's been a tremendous change to a very archaic and inefficient tax process, right? Especially in a country which has, so many state level differences, business happening pan-India. It managed to unify a lot of things that were scattered.
She doesn't explicitly call out GST.
See, GST has been, I think the opposition leader, Rahul Gandhi, called it the Gabbar Singh tax, right? So for him, GST has essentially, destroyed Indian businessmen, small Indian businessmen, and that has been one of their poll planks, is that the GST has been, something that has set the country back.
Set the country back. Okay.
Which I think there is a significant challenge to that argument on the merits alone, right?
Okay.
So again, that's another piece of evidence that she's using for me, which doesn't stand a full rigorous evidence test.
And she's not explicitly mentioned which other taxes she is talking about. So,
correct. So
I guess that is open for us to interpret it as.
Right? Then if we're looking at things like, say, terror laws, right? Anti-terror laws. Now, something like an anti-terror law, admittedly, this government has been harder on identifying sources of terrorism across the country.
Okay.
We have had a very dark and scary history vis-a-vis terrorism. You and I having seen it very close, in the city, right? And it is real enough of a problem that as recently as last month, senior Islamic State operatives have been caught out by the National Investigation Agency in Assam, right? So this is not it's a non-problem and we are just going on this witch hunt. No, there's a very real threat of terrorism of all kinds that this country faces, especially when borders are porous and information is fast flowing and unchecked. You can go from a stable situation to a situation that's destabilized very quickly. You can maybe say that they're a bit harder than they need to be, but I would leave that opinion to experts. I think many years from now, someone from the National Investigative Agency is going to release a book and you'll see how much they've done just to ensure that Indians sleep well at night. I'm sure we don't even know the kind of threats that they're having to eliminate, the kind of cells that are popping up across this country day in, day out.
So people aren't seeing any terror attacks reported in the news. So they are reacting saying, why are we doing so much to combat terror? Maybe you aren't seeing terror attacks in the news because we are doing so much to combat terror.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I wouldn't like if people link this to like catchier terms that other countries have experienced, that have been used on other countries in the past. Say like America's war on terror. Like this is not that. This is a very different, insidious type of informational, local level terrorism that can take place, and it's one that you unfortunately have to nip in the bud, and it's something that will never go, by the way. I truly think that you're not going to have a world that is entirely free of terrorism.
Probably a natural part of any type of bordered nation is that people will try to infiltrate.
And for me, again, for me the point is whether we have very strict anti-terror laws or not is an argument that we can have, but whether this is an argument that supports the author's argument that we are creeping into authoritarianism because of anti-terror laws, I don't think that stands
It would need some strong evidence. I mean, I don't know what connection it would have.
Correct. So for me, it again is coming down to like a keyword / buzzword overusage to get people alarmed at some level, to get them to at least think where the author wants them to go.
I think all articles like this are likely to have a kernel of truth at least.
For sure.
There's no way. But what happens is you hook someone in with a kernel of truth and then just start giving them what they already know is coming, packaged a little differently with a little polishing.
Exactly. Because then if you look at the author talking about, say, the investigative agencies.
Yes.
Right? Now there, I think there is a strong kernel of truth. Because as we've seen in the last 2 months, the Enforcement Directorate and the CBI have both been, to me, a little heavy-handed in how they have gone after certain political individuals. Right? including her big piece of evidence is Arvind Kerjiwal, which we will come to.
Let's get into that now.
Yeah,
because
let's do it.
Let's do the part, because I think this part stands strong, and if it holds merit, we should
for sure
address and get into that.
Yeah. So I think there's been a disproportionate targeting for sure. That for me, the investigative agencies have played a larger role. Now, here's something that you can't ignore in this, right? If you're worried that the ED is going to have something on you, in many respects, a lot of these people have a lot on them, right? So you're worried at some level because you are complicit in sometimes high-level corruption, right? If you look at what happened recently in Jharkhand with the leading dynastic family there, or other instances even closer to home, like corruption here is not a non-issue, right? The investigative agencies do have a mandate to go after corrupt individuals, and if a certain quantum of those corrupt individuals happen to be from a certain party, that is problematic, but that does not change the fact that if they are corrupt, they should be brought to justice.
100%. No one here is even saying he's innocent.
That is a thing, right?
No one, you'll go on every page, it's like, yeah, he's guilty. But why are you arresting him now? That's it. Yeah. No one is saying he's innocent and you're arresting him now.
Yeah. So with the Kerjiwal arrest, for me, I think the timing of it is what I don't like very much. It's making... you're just about to go into election. What gives? And there I sense at some level the Aam Aadmi Party did pose a legitimate philosophical threat to the central party in that they were offering something that was very different, right? What Congress is offering is like old, tried and tested.
Can you tell a bit more about how it's different and what they're offering? Compare them to the Congress.
I mean, the APs, that's why it's like, there's no, what is that? This election, you've seen the strangest of bedfellows, right? The start of Arvind Kejriwal's movement and the Aam Aadmi Party's movement, a lot of who they were targeting was the Congress for being ruthlessly corrupt, for having driven this country to the ground institutionally, for doing all these things that have like set India back in its growth and have cheated the Aam Aadmi, the common man, out of what was due to them, right? So to see them now in an alliance together is perplexing, to say the least. And this is where I would challenge this piece as a source of evidence in this article against the center, is because much of the early evidence on the charge sheet against Kerjiwal in this EDRS, a lot of this started actually through the Congress pushing for it, who they're now in the India alliance with, right? So you're like, man, what gives here? What gives? So so the Congress was also hoping that the ED goes after Arvind Kejriwal, but now that they're in the alliance, they're saying, no, why are you going after him for the excise policy scam? And
they were going after him exactly when he was criticizing them for their corruption.
Correct. For me, the fact that this is happening while it definitely is true to an extent, then the investigative agencies are operating with more... See, they're operating in a way, I think, which we've never seen them operate before. I think that is probably what's been disconcerting to people, right? In the past, and this is what I've been feeling as I'm reading, right, over the last few years. Back in the day, certain sections of society electorally were above the law. You were operating with impunity. You could not be touched. And I think what is happening with the investigative agencies, and more generally with a lot of the anti-corruption efforts of this government and even up at some level, you are destabilizing a very, very profitable network for a lot of people, right? You are shaking the status quo like has never been done before, and you are bound to make enemies here and abroad, right? You are really, people were getting fat of this corruption, in the sense of economically, right? You're siphoning off money in the lakhs of crores, like we were saying. and that kind of tap is being shut for political or non-political reasons. And I think for a lot of people that's going to be scary. You're going to see even more kind of vitriolic outbursts against the agencies for doing this. And I think in cases where it's been heavy-handed, anyways, the High Court and Supreme Court will step in and resolve. But my point is, if the court does come and resolve, like say in the case of Arvind Kerjiwal, right? He ignored 9 summons of the ED, right? So the fact that he got arrested so close to the elections is because he ignored the 9 summons prior, because he believed that it's bogus summons, right? But he didn't get the bail that he had posted for as well from the court. For me, what's more problematic than the Arvind Kejriwal arrest even is that Manish Sisodia, who was his kind of right-hand man in the Aam Aadmi Party, he's been arrested and in jail for like 6 months without a proper trial. Now, for me, that is a very big problem, right? I don't like that that's happened, and I hope that actions are taken to resolve this.
Now, this is obviously done by the ED, technically supposed to operate completely independently of the government, but...
Correct. Like, see, that for me has not changed, especially now. You know, like these agencies would have always been a tool to go after people now and before because there was corruption in the system, right? You're gonna find things on people. You're gonna find leverage on people when the system is.
And if you have do they really expect you to flip a coin? I guess. You know, like I'll flip a coin and decide who to go after versus they've got exactly the same crimes, but one is against my political agenda and one helps it.
Yeah.
I think you should flip a coin. Should.
Yeah. So, you know, I think on the heavy-handedness of investigative agencies, there's a point there as far as this article is concerned. But see, until that point, the sources of evidence that they've used for me are not as solid and firm as they should be for making such a grandstanding claim about, a dark shadow of creeping authoritarianism. And then they move into 2 points which I think are really, really flimsy as far as I'm concerned. One is the political centralization is being legitimized. So she's saying that 2 state governments were stripped of their power, to function as autonomous governments and made as union territories. And now her first example is already where she loses me because her evidence is Jammu and Kashmir, right? But that is for me a once again long historical issue wherein Article 370 that was abrogated was done for a very, I argue, and again this you could probably argue ad nauseum with people, I think for a legitimate reason given our 21st century context on what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. And since then, if not on the development metrics, if not on the growth metrics, certainly the security situation has improved by leaps and bounds in Kashmir, right? I think there's like bipartisan at least agreement that this has happened, right?
Good.
Right? Very good. So if you're citing the Article 370 abrogation as a piece of evidence that again creeping authoritarianism is looming into the country, I don't know if that stands a strong test.
I've heard people say this surrounding issues like Jammu and Kashmir, that yes, it's an authoritarian government, but it's what we need now.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea that people think what we need is an authoritarian government.
Right.
I've heard this from supporters of Modi. They almost play off the other side, calling him authoritarian. It's like, that's what we needed. We needed strength, and we needed people who will just take decisions unilaterally. Let the cards fall where they may. Let the chips fall where they may. What do you think of this idea?
I have my problems with it as well. I don't think that we should ever be fantasizing a world where you're under an authoritarian government, because I think when you're someone when you're on the I don't like you list in authoritarian government, it's no longer as much fun, right? But for me, again, like phrases like that are said because of a history of governance in many respects that came across as weak, indecisive, right? Not able to do what had to be done,
people are basically saying strong governance and they're conflating it with authoritarianism because this buzzword is being thrown around.
Correct.
Almost like a self-defense mechanism. You know, you're calling me authoritarian. I'll say, okay, I'm authoritarian. That's what we need.
Correct. Right? If this is what is authoritarian, then maybe this is what we need. If we can get laws that should have been passed a long time ago passed, if we can, make more Indians part of the development story in whatever way or shape or form possible, then we're going to do it. Right? So if it's a ruthless intent point to achieve your goal within the laws, right, then that's a different point entirely, right? That's not authoritarianism. That's just, we're seeing a state that's I was joking about this because both and I know we're going to talk on this in detail once the BJP also releases their election manifesto. But when I was reading the Congress manifesto, I was just thinking there was a time when, people would not even take manifestos seriously, right? It's like, everyone will come and say, we want to solve poverty across the country, we want to do this, we want to do this. And whether or not you would actually see through your promises was completely up to God. It was like, I don't know. This is what we're saying we're going to do, so vote for us and then we'll try and do some of it at some level. Whereas what this government has shown is that, hey, if we say we're going to do it on a manifesto, we're going to do it. We're going to do whatever we can to fulfill our mandate vis-a-vis our election manifesto. Right? So now you've entered in a world where even what you're putting in your manifesto is very, very important. Right? So again, for me, it's that intent. It's intent plus ability to follow through and having the majority that you need, right, in the electoral houses to achieve what you need to. Right? So in the end, this has all been done democratically still. Right?
Got it. And the second example she gives of Delhi?
Delhi, for me, once again, is a unique problem. Right? So the center-state dispute in union territories has been existing for a long time. Even before the current dispute is when it got very, very sensationalized between Arvind Kerjiwal and Lieutenant Governor Saxena. But this has been an issue that's existed long before as well, where always the union territories felt hard done by because there was someone from the center, essentially, the Lieutenant Governor, who you had to answer to. And here Arvind Kerjiwal was claiming that he was impeding their ability to govern Delhi the right way. This is a longer conversation, but again, if you're using this as an argument in your article, this is not something that's new or changed. It's just become more sensationalized, right? So you will have center-state disputes, and it's, by the way, not just Delhi. It's in many states. Even in Tamil Nadu, you have this fight. So you have it in many states. So for me, to highlight this as a key piece of your evidence, supporting an argument that India is slipping into large-scale authoritarianism is weak. As far as a logical link is concerned, right? After which I want to go to one line. She makes a point here that Hindu nationalism is impatient with the principle of accommodation, right? Because they seek a singular national identity. Now, if that were really the case, Rohan, logic would hold that the BJP should not be winning in states without a significant portion of Hindus. You're logically with me on that? And her example here is that this one nation approach erodes the political credibility you need to mediate assertions of ethnic identity evident in the Manipur crisis that we saw recently. Take even that region. This is a region where you have states like Nagaland, Tripura, Meghalaya, Mizoram, where the BJP has gone from strength to strength again electorally. Nagaland being 90% plus Christian. So, if this party was so obsessed with its idea of Hindu nationalism, the way that it's being portrayed, and is impatient with the principle of accommodation, how can it win a state which is 90% Christian?
Well, they're rigging the elections, bro.
See,
so you were saying, how would they win in elections?
Yeah.
Where some states have a 90% Christian population.
And a large portion of tribal population. The two communities that the BJP is supposedly ignoring and punishing. right? You would not be able to win their faith. You would not be able to win their support. And you're winning in those constituencies, right? So something is not logically linking up, right? Now, further, you're also seeing the BJP has won in constituencies in other states as well, say like Deoband, for example, which is largely even Muslim-dominated constituency. So they're able to even move the voting patterns there. So at some level, where I would challenge this author is that they're saying, even in their first line, that it's an exclusionary approach. I fundamentally disagree with that, because exclusionary is what we had done until now. It was the idea is that there's exclusive groups and we want them to stay divided because that's how we win elections. Whereas with this government, the idea is sabka saath, sabka vikas. Whether that follow through happens, only time will tell. But you genuinely want people to stop voting on
identity politics,
right? So logically, you and I are trying to be men of reason and logic. Would that not be more accommodative and less exclusionary to believe that, hey, vote because you believe that politician is going to do something for you, right? So to come back to the point on, I want to get to those words, like let's get into the meat of it, right? Okay. Accommodation, exclusionary. So one great example of accommodation could have been when the Election Commission proposed the idea of remote voting for migrants, right? So in a state like, say, Maharashtra, nowadays in states like Tamil Nadu, you have a large presence of migrants. That's very much shaped India's organized and disorganized sectors in the last 15 to 20 years. And this law, if passed, right, to allow them to vote as migrants in that state, would have led to enfranchisement of a huge scale, right? People that are Indians that would like to vote, but that cannot vote right now, but would have been given the ability to vote through remote EVMs. That was blocked by almost every opposition party, right? So
saying that it will be weaponized by the BJP.
No, I mean, they've always cast aspersions on EVMs in general, which is hilarious because when they win the elections, the electronic voting machines are working fine. But if they lose elections, there's a problem, right? So in the same election where they're saying that there's rigging or EVM hacking happening, if they win, everything's fine, right? So for me, that's a very dubious argument to begin with on the EVM. So this is essentially a law that would have allowed for greater enfranchisement of voters. And it was blocked, right?
So who's not accommodating?
So who's not accommodating voters in that sense, right? So for me, the idea that they're somehow not accommodating just doesn't stand even the most basic litmus test for me of a logical argument. Another initiative that has been proposed is the idea that election cycles for center and state should be more unified. So the idea of one nation, one election is I believe the catchphrase that has been thrown around. See, the idea is that unfortunately in India, because state election cycles are not lined up anymore with the central election cycles and individual state election cycles are not matched up, you are essentially having parties that are always on election mode. Right? Parties are always campaigning rather than doing the job that they elected to do. That's the idea. And this is the central government that's saying this. Right? Not to mention that constant campaigning places an immense burden on the state and central exchequer. Like, it's very expensive to run elections. In fact, this 2024 general election, it's going to run into the billions, if not more. Right? So that is a tremendous cost. And if you do introduce some kind of election cycle where state plus center are lined up, so when you're voting for a bunch of different things, that can be far more efficient, can lead to tremendous cost saving, and can be helpful in the longer term perspective of where India is going. And even this, just for the sake of it having been proposed by the center, is opposed. Right? And luckily enough, I'm happy to read, in a lot of the editorials and papers that are, say, traditionally more critical of the government and supportive of the government. There seems to be a kind of consensus opinion that, hey, this is actually where we should be going, right?
Okay.
It makes sense,
Is this a global trend?
not entirely. I'm not sure how many countries are following. Not how many countries have it at the scale we have, right? I mean, ours is like elections are. You have 900 million plus people that are voting. It's unfathomable. It is a celebration of democracy you can't imagine, and it's sad that you have an opposition party that is starting the elections in such a defeatist sense, right? So hear me out. So you're saying that, we're a democracy, it's authoritarianism, elections aren't fair. Before you go and fight in that election, and then what if you're to win? So then every constituency, every seat that you won is tarnished by your own words as being unfairly won, right? So you're just, it's like you're kicking mud on a process just to try and score a win of some sort.
But it's short-term thinking. It's not
very short-term thinking.
So let's move on into the final couple of points in this article, which I think in some cases are the most sad to see written here.
Yeah.
To show huge developments in technology that we have been making being shown in such a negative light.
Yeah.
So give some background into what these innovations are that have allowed for a new style of politics.
Well, yeah. The line,
read out the line.
I'll read the line verbatim, right? At the same time, technology has legitimized a new kind of welfare politics, one that removes traditional intermediation by local and state governments, enabling in its place a direct emotive connection with recipients built around the cult of Mr. Modi as a sole benefactor. Now, for me, there's so much that's wrong with saying this, because right in your first line, one of your critiques against the government is literally that they have introduced welfare that has sidestepped intermediaries. Right? Your critique is that you have introduced a more effective form of welfare politics, because the intermediaries, if I'm not mistaken, I forget which politician said this, might have even been Rajiv Gandhi back in the day, but we'll fact check that. Of the 1 rupee that had to go to someone, only 15 paisa was actually reaching the end beneficiary. So if you are saying that we've moved away from that, and for you that is a sad thing, then you're completely misaligned with where this country wants to go.
And needs to go.
Right?
And her issue with it seems to be that something good is helping someone bad in her head.
And the fact that for her, the party that has introduced this policy is being seen as the main benefactor or the individual, to me that's also problematic, because look, if you are in an electoral democracy, parties will vie for brand building and name recognition. That is how it works. That is why our C-Link is the Rajiv Gandhi C-Link. That's why most of the schemes prior to this government were including someone from the Gandhi family. Right?
It's a job at the end of the day. You put your accomplishments on your CV.
Yeah. So, but I guess back then it was not one individual, so it was a cult of a family, not a cult of an individual. Is that better? Right?
That's worse. At least with the individual, stay with an individual.
Yeah.
With the cult of the family, you're talking about dynasty politics. I always thought it was funny how people seem to be more concerned in the public with nepotism in Bollywood, as though that is of any real consequence to the country at all, who acts in the next coming of age chick flick.
Yeah.
Versus nepotism in things like politics. You should allow nepotism in Bollywood.
Yeah. Who cares?
Who cares? It's a completely private luxury venture.
Yeah.
Whereas politics, it should be, it is illegal, I'm sure.
I mean,
on paper.
It's been the way of the nation for so many years, I mean, there was a crazy comparative thread that had come out on Twitter. This guy had analyzed how many people were related to the ruling family in Bihar, and it's nuts. Dude, it's like a family and friends operation. It's like uncles, brothers, brother-in-law, father-in-law, like that level of nepotism, right? So all of that in the last 40-50 years was okay. So, that, again, this article just shows someone that, and here's the thing, she is the author's head of a well-reputed, top-notch think tank in the country, or has been for so long. So I can't help but feel like there's an agenda behind writing something like this as the election approaches, right? Where you want to try and at least move some section of society that would be willing to listen to you, that somehow this is a bad thing. The fact that people are receiving a welfare, people are being brought into a welfare system that is more efficient is a bad thing, right? And then her next point on that, which you used that word before, is that there's this idea that this is becoming Vishwas
politics.
Vishwas meaning trust, right? So Vishwas,
we need to go back to a time when you didn't need to trust your rulers.
I don't know how to make sense of this. Sometimes I really feel, I felt this a lot in my master's degree, Rohan. Academia is a beautiful space that promotes critical, independent thinking, but has also unfortunately become, in some level, this laboratory for just testing out insane ideologies, right? Like just new kind of, you just put a catchy name to this new theory that you have, and if you share it enough people, it can get this kind of mileage. Like, what do you mean Vishwas politics is bad? So look at the line. Vishwas politics encourages a preference for welfare as direct benefits for which the leader can claim direct credit in areas ranging from cooking gas to toilets. Yeah, who else can get credit for moving a regulation that passes this? Who do you give it to?
It brings us back to this idea, Vishwas politics. Look at the language used there.
Yeah.
The use of Vishwas rather than saying trust implies that let's say the word in Hindi, it will give it this woo-woo sounding idea.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just called it a trust-based political system, it sounds perfectly legitimate somehow.
Correct. Right?
The use of the word Vishwas is quite telling there. In the author who wrote it, it's very intentional. Otherwise, he would have written trust. Now, like a 500 page. It's not like we don't know the word for this in English. It's some special Hindi thing they do, and it's like an aura of, it's magic. It's a spell that's been cast it's a spell they've been casting on the population. It's an English word called trust.
Yeah.
And if you can't trust the people who are leading you, what is the point of following them?
Correct. And then they clarify, they go deeper into this. Embedded in this is a subtle social contract that positions welfare as a largesse of the leader rather than a moral obligation of the state to rights-bearing citizens. Again, hand on your heart, if you listen to what this government has said, they truly believe that this is a moral obligation to a state's right-bearing citizens. That's why they want the citizen to receive that benefit. Right? If you didn't believe that your people deserve this, that it was their moral obligation, why would you put this much effort into ensuring that the development is holistic and it's inclusive and it doesn't see all these divisions that the opposition party wants you to see? Right? That line, sabka saath, sabka vikas, goes completely against this idea, right? You believe that everyone has the moral obligation. If you're a citizen of this country, you have a moral obligation to the schemes that are launched to help the people here. Right? So it's like you're saying, it's like taking things that if they were written in any other way, they would be considered good.
They'd be like, you're wasting paper writing this because this is obvious.
Yeah.
That this should be the goal of a government is obvious. Yeah. And reframing it negatively doesn't do anyone any good.
Correct. And then the other points that she has are just beating the old same drum about you're dividing people by religion. Here she's talking about promoting anti-Muslim laws. If, again, she doesn't specifically cite which ones.
She doesn't cite which of anything.
Which of anything in the article.
Except Arvind Kerjiwal, which interestingly is the only piece of evidence I think both parties, not both parties, but people on either sides of the political divide are like kind of...
This is problematic, right?
This is problematic.
So her strong point she's cited, but everything else is flimsy. And she's not provided the actual laws. So if it's CAA, right, the Citizenship Amendment Act, which again, I'm sure we will go into this at length in a specific conversation.
But it's not like it slipped her mind to mention it.
Correct, right? So to call that an overtly anti-Muslim law is academically disingenuous.
And I don't think she wanted to open herself to that criticism about the CAA.
Correct.
So she's now just taken a blanket case of ambiguous laws that no one knows about.
Exactly.
And knowing everyone is going to, in their head, link it to the CAA, but not on the paper, so they aren't going to dive into the details of is this actually anti-Muslim.
Correct. So she'll either want people to make that mental leap or logical leap to anti-CAA, or make a logical leap to the fact that newspapers were running with this headline even internationally, just to me reeks of such a sad agenda, like agenda peddling type of journalism. They called it an anti-hijab law. What happened in Karnataka, which was a law that had to do with specific school-based norms on uniforms, right? And even people from both sides again came and clarified this, but headlines ran with that. So you had newspapers that were calling it this, and that's that's again dishonest, academically dishonest, journalistically dishonest. Which is why, again, you're right. She's not actually said which law.
She's not said it purposely,
right? At least that's the only logical link I can make.
But I think we've pretty much gone through it. It's not a long article. I suggest people go and read it because it's a pretty simple read. It's easy. It's a 4-page article.
Opinions on it,
and it's an opinion piece which she's completely entitled to.
And one more quick point, Ron, before we close on this. I think we can just maybe bring that. It's another small line that she mentioned that has a huge implication, right? Here she said, with increasingly even the Supreme Court has been reticent to do what it needs to do, right? She says that in the piece.
Yes, it doesn't have the government's backing, and so it is not able to make executive judgments.
Which I think that's again dishonest, because would that same Supreme Court say have passed a law right now on electoral bonds, right? Or has passed a series of laws that have never always gone in the favor of the state. It is a truly independent, secular body and the highest constitutional body of our land. And you're saying that it's somehow reticent now to do it. Again, that to me is a statement that's not backed or rooted in much evidence. It's more just alarmist claim set to mislead people at some level that even our judicial process is under threat, which to me the data is not showing that entirely. But yeah, we can move on. People read the article on your own.
Read the article. Opinions. Please let us know what do you think about it. Do you have any disagreements? And I'm sure we'll get into this electoral bonds thing soon.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic for sure.
We will dedicate maybe an episode to that.
Yeah.
Till then, thank you for watching, and thank you, Puru. I'm Rohan, and please let us know. Follow us on Instagram.
Yeah.
We're going to start a Twitter.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter as well. A lot of or X. It's not called Twitter anymore.
I think I still feel Twitter.
I still call it Twitter. Yeah,
I still feel Twitter.